You've spent your entire career at PwC, 38 years, and the last 11 years you've been Chief Learning Officer.
Yes.
Tell us about some of the significant learning and development initiatives that you've overseen as CLO.
Some of those are programmatic. Actually, others are actually more strategic, right, and organizational. If I think back in my career when we first started thinking more about the importance of education and what it meant to creating a talented professional that actually could support the brand of PwC, we started to think more broadly about what was possible. And back then in the beginning, it was more about curricula. Today, it's more about the enterprise. How do you take a more enterprise-based approach? And so as we think about that, in that model, it said, how do you then look at what's the career profile, right, at each stage of one's career, and what's the expectations around that so that they're fully capable to perform? So with that as a backdrop, and the evolving nature of technology, the range of things that I've been involved with has been quite vast. So just recently, a self-study that was actually an integrated simulation, right, beyond the traditional self-study, and thinking beyond how you could create something like that. With most recent technology-based, structured, but technology-based things. How do we actually think more about a range of assets and employ those so that people can have ready access to them on the job, or some things that are more recent things. At a programmatic level, one of the programs was in the area of leadership, and working on a concept around leadership that simply said, in this day and age, how do you help people make a more impactful, effective choice? So how do you choose? So there's many things you talk about with leadership, but with the nature of the media that's available today and the opportunities that people face, how do you sort? How do you actually step back and think about what's a good choice? In order to do that, it isn't about simply your role. It's about the broader aspects of what you are as yourself. How does that relate to your family? How does that relate to your career and to your community? So those are the things I've been involved with. It's been quite fun.
Tell us a little bit more about how globalization and technology have changed the way things work in a learning organization.
Sure. So technology is always going to be a challenge, right? It's easy to simply say, go after the technology because it's available and it's there, right? And understanding, though, the human condition, and human beings are very social, there's a balance that needs to be there. So the opportunity for technology used in a smart way can actually do wonders for advancing your opportunity to accelerate one's development, and do that at a reasonable, affordable cost, right? Those things are there. And naturally, in a globalized environment, having the ability to do that, I think the opportunity is actually growing, and that's going to continue to expand for us and any organization to capitalize on the value of that.
What are some of the biggest changes in the way learning and development programs are developed and administered in an organization since you've been in the industry?
Sure. You have the tradition of the ADDIE model. You have other models that are coming into play. I think today, in today's environment, actually looking at the nature of talent, the generational differences that are at play, the expectations associated with that, and the actual needs of the business strategy and the integration of that influences how you actually think about that today. And so we found, and I've been driving that for several years, is that we need to actually figure out a way to do more to recognize the need to produce talent who have the capability set to execute, that's visible, it's measurable, and is creating an impact on the business. And so understanding that's the destination, it influences how you think about the way you design, the nature of the specific objectives, the nature of the themes, and the execution elements that you employ.
The various workforce generations that are in the workplace. You've got your baby boomers and your Gen X and Gen Y.
I have them all.
Yeah. How mindful do you have to be of the differences in the way these different generations learn when you're developing training?
Yeah.
Is that something that you have to take into account, or?
To a degree. I think it stems more of what's the cultural environment that you're all involved in at the time. So at PwC, we have significant efforts that are employed to actually how do we source talent, right? And make sure that that talent is the very best. So that influence is how you think about the generational mix. We're a young firm, right? Because of the nature of our population and our mix, we're a younger firm, so we're more aware of how generational mix comes together and how it in effect is employed. What I found is that because of the immersive nature of the environment, the generations blend. So I've had situations where I've had older generation actually saying, why can't we use technology more? I've had younger generations comment and it says, I use technology so much, when are we going to get together? Right? So you get a sense of the importance of the social fabric and what that means to your organization, which for me has actually created a natural blend of how the generations come together.
Tell us how you measure success of your learning and development
Sure.
programs. Are they tied to the bottom line, or are there other
Sure.
ways that you measure?
Sure. Today, more than ever, understanding how you measure impact is increasingly important. It's valuable from a training standpoint. It's most valuable if you want to be seen as a leader who's sitting at the executive table trying to solve the same problem that the CEO of the organization, the human capital leader of the organization is trying to solve. So if you want to be relevant, you have to embrace it. So the Kirkpatrick scale is there, and we use it. We have looked at it, and actually our measurement is geared around some very simple things. Like it, learn it, live it, leverage it, right, is what we play with. And the importance of that is to say there's a certain value proposition that's associated with, do they like it, do they learn it? The question is, are they applying it? Because that's where the difference occurs. So not only do we employ the natural measurements that are there from a standard standpoint, but we actually investigate thoroughly what the application sets are on the job and how does that contribute to things that are measurable and important to our business and actually show the linkage to that. That's been very successful for us.
What are some of those things that you link it to?
Natural things around the how do you measure turnover, the effect of turnover. Do you look at leverage? How do you look at leverage? How do you look at connectivity? How do you understand whether or not people see what they're doing as being meaningful? And then for us, the leverage part is if they've learned it and they're applying it, are they actually passing it on? Are they actually employing it in work with others? And so we're looking for that as well. And therefore we do more immersive studies, and we do them over time, not just at the point of completion or the beginning and end of the program. You know, our beginning and end points are naturally elongated for those areas that we measure.
Tell us what your role as CLO is.
I feel a very significant responsibility to understand the brand of the firm, the expectations of that brand, the expectations of our strategy and how we're going to employ to make sure that I'm doing the things that are necessary to ensure we have sufficient talent that can consistently be deployed for the benefit of the firm, right? So I start there. I think about it in terms that says what's the capability sets that I need? How are they changing and evolving for the business, from the business standpoint? What's the nature of the intellectual property that exists outside the firm? So who's doing the best thinking? Where am I going to find it, right? How am I being connected to that? And how am I engaging then my leadership team to understand the direction of where we're going to go before we get down to that point of execution, right? So when you think about the nature of technology, it's great to see yourself being aligned with strategy and saying the gold standard is my learning platform is aligned with my strategy, right? I think it's actually evolving beyond that, because if we look at the enterprise level, the ability to engage the enterprise and the elements around learning linked to execution, I think the value proposition goes up to how do you create an empowered organization that learns, right? So I think the nature of where we're going to go and what we're going to see, especially the opportunity of technology, will take us there. So I feel significant responsibility as a CLO to think about those things. I have an additional responsibility, which I feel very committed to, is how do I develop the people around me? How do I ensure we're sourcing the right talent to be associated with the firm on a full-time basis or a part-time basis, but making sure that that talent is there. And then as a partner and owner of the business, am I achieving what is affordable, and am I getting the return on that investment? And as a result, am I producing people that have the ability to differentiate themselves in the marketplace and further the brand of the firm? As a CLO, I see that as my role.
How can CLOs stay relevant in the future?
It's a really fun question because I believe we're going into a very fascinating time. The opportunities that exist with technology, the expectations around how that technology is influencing the way the other generations think, and the nature of how business can be conducted, right? And as the workforce has become more flexible, more dynamic, right, the CLO needs to be, who's in a current CLO role, needs to understand how those forces are influencing the dynamics. So when you start to think about the models around speed to market, capability sets, right? Do you have a full-time or flexible workforce? How can technology play a role, a meaningful role? How do you preserve culture, right, in an environment where people are working more independently, right? All of those things. So understanding those influences, and even today, the research that's which is fun research around neuroscience, right, mindfulness and everything else that is going on today, I think that this creates a lot of opportunity to remain curious and explore.
Some of the challenges that come with developing and administering training to an organization that has 39,000 employees.
Scale of what we do is always on the table. It's important to understand the economics associated with that, and are you getting value? So there's a significant element that also says that the nature of the talent pool that you're working with is very dynamic in and of itself. So the nature of strictly curricula-based intervention is a limiting factor. Understanding the influence of how you look at the engagement and the nature of dialogue that occurs in a daily workplace environment as a part of your development strategy in dealing with scale is very, very important. It's very easy to do it in an environment where you basically have a small group, you're centrally located, there's a natural conversation that's going on. But how do you, when you're in an environment which is diversified as the one I'm in, and at the scale I'm in, those are the areas where we have significant challenge. Executing, that's the easy part.
How much of your instruction is classroom versus online or remote now?
We generally don't give it a percentage, but we're more focused on, as the nature of what we do, we have more face-to-face than we do technology. And it's important from the standpoint of culture, business development opportunities, the social elements of our firm. I think those are really important for us to understand. So how do you leverage it? How we're using the space and how we're blending within that space has evolved quite a bit. So while face-to-face still is a significant portion of what we do, how we're doing it, as someone said, when we blend, we're not making a smoothie, right? It's important that we understand that the nature of how you blend and blend technology into it is a significant factor of your success. In a very simple level, I think that how technology is evolving gives you an opportunity to step back and look at how you're using that physical space today. Can you make it more simulation-based? Can you make it more behavioral? And can you use technology to, in effect, and the hot word is flip it, right? Which is important, because the nature of technology says that I can actually do things using a different media, right, that gets my folks who are going to participate more prepared, more engaged, and then put a higher premium on the use of the physical space to accomplish more. So technology provides just an amazing opportunity to think that through and what that means for any organization and how you do it. It's actually, you might actually be bringing people together, spending the same money to have them be there, but the ROI associated with what you've accomplished has improved dramatically. So when we think about blending and use technology, I think it actually leads to how can you look at those things that create the most significant benefit to the individuals and to the organization. And that's the deeper aspects, the more behavioral aspects of learning.
Would you be able to just give us one example of one of the learning programs that you use this approach?
We recently had a large conference, and prior to attending the conference, there was preparatory work that wasn't read this, it wasn't a book, It was more around actually looking at various certain sites to get information to create context that was basically factual data. And then at the conference, we actually changed the environment to be more simulation-based. So when you arrived, you had the baseline information, and now you were immediately immersed in understanding the simulation environment. So you were introduced to a fact pattern, which throughout the experience, you continued to enrich, employ, and have conversation about. So one, it was safe. Two, it was actually more meaningful and more valuable. And you use the vehicles of WebEx, anything you can think of in the range of technology, even simple things like an interactive PDF, which was the ability for them to learn prior to going. So it doesn't have to be complex, it's just how do you prepare them to come. So that would be an example.
How do you pick the best learning approach, the best learning method for your organization?
It's always a range, right? And for most of my career, it's always been situational, right? There's never have been, I can't think of a time when we took a simple cookie cutter approach and said one size fits all, right? There's always the appreciation of the environment and the context of what we were trying to employ. So if it's for a particular industry sector, we would employ a strategy that made sense for them. If it was something core to the entire business segment, we would employ a strategy for that. So I found that over my experience is that understanding the environmental factors and understanding the right context on how to engage improve the success, that once you actually treated them to whatever you designed, they were actually able to apply it, and that added value. So it has always been situational.
How do you develop learning plans for the organization, for teams, and for individuals?
So there's a significant investment in relationships, right? Being integrated with the business. So within the structure of my team, I have overall core leaders for a business, and then within that I have individuals who have a part of the responsibility to engage with a segment of the business, which requires them to make sure that they're not just looking at it from the educational value, this is what I do. They are learning about that business. They are learning about the issues that are on top of mind for that leader in that business. And then with that, they actually sit down and engage with first a very informative, informational conversation that's frequent of understanding where the business is. And then they come back within their team and they talk about what's the right response and solution set given what they now understand. So we try to avoid frequently someone who wants to say, I have a day and this is what I'd like to do within that day. We actually like to start with, what are you trying to solve for? Let's understand that first, and then we'll come back to you with a solution set. And so that quite frequently goes on within my organization. And I love it because it gives my team members the opportunity to grow, right? They're not simply, I'm a simple designer, or this is what I do. They have a greater breadth as engaging as a leader when it comes to developing talent.
How would you define a learning organization?
It's a fun thing, right, to actually think about. From a structure standpoint, if the organization values learning and therefore they have a learning function and they have curricula, they have an LMS, and they have all those things, I think traditionally people would define a learning organization as that. All right, for me, right, I look at the broader aspects, and as we were saying at the beginning, the enterprise approach to that. If I look at an organization where people are engaged and I can actually physically observe learning going on anywhere and everywhere, the fact that conversations are going, the people are searching the sites that they need to search when they need it, they're asking those questions, right? If I see those in play and I see that openly in play, I see that more valuable and more critical to the nature of a learning organization than the traditional ways that we think about that. Because if I did it on the traditional side, it's a very expensive model. Right? And today, I think we have to recognize that with advancing technology, the nature of how people believe they need the flexibility in order to be able to learn what they need when they need it, and the more important aspects around how that links to an affordable model, right? The way we think about how people learn and how that influences the environmental factors that exist will evolve the answer to the question of a learning organization.
How do you build a culture within the organization that helps build a learning organization?
Sure. It starts for us day one. Right? So the first day you are engaged, and we study this, and also is important that as part of that, there's an aspect of it that's behavioral. Right, so you can share with someone what you value. You could share what you feel as proper behavior. You can discuss accountability, right? You can discuss what your capability sets are. But it's really important to actually understand how you can experience those. And that's what we do starting day one. And then from that day, it's reinforced whenever our people come together. It's not just within the development organization, but it's a broader part of the core of what a human capital strategy employs, right? Being accountable and being a keeper of culture and recognizing how the dilutive influences to culture can be, a dilutive influence can be how you employ technology. It could be how you look at your talent pools. What's the influence of turnover, on your talent pools? Can always have those influences. So it's a broader human capital strategy, but within the function of learning, it's present as everything that we do.
Can you talk a little bit about how PwC manages the learning operation in terms of content, delivery, technology, administration?
Sure. Given our scale, we do have an LMS. We do use social media sites, so we have an internal, what we call Spark site that we employ. We actually also have a call center, right, and an operations center so that anyone can contact, wherever you are, whatever business you're in, you can contact and get information that you need, especially around execution. So if you're enrolling in a program or you're part of something, you have the convenience of being able to get that access. Structurally, from an organizational standpoint, we're centralized. So within one function, whether it's a particular business need or something that's core and central to the firm, so if you think about it in terms of technical ability, leadership ability, relationships, acumen, whatever, wherever you employ, that's in my organization as one central function, including things that are regulatory and compliance based. So the efficiency associated with that and understanding how you employ those in an efficient way falls under one central organization at PwC.
Mm-hmm. How much of the content that you develop is developed in-house and how much is developed by outside vendors? Is it a combination of both?
It's definitely a combination. I couldn't give you a percentage because that would only be a guess because it's evolving. The value today is understanding who's out there, and with technology, how do you think about what you create? How do you think about what you co-create? And how do you curate, right, in a way that actually brings what you need to the table? So I think the mix is going to continue to evolve.
Do you find that there are any skill gap issues when you're hiring for PwC?
I think you always find them. When you look at the STEM, right, and data analytics and the evolving around that, I think there's an uplift that is important to understand how data is going to leverage itself in the future and what that means, and organizations, how do you capitalize on that, will continue to be there, and everybody's, I think, looking at that. But when you actually, when I look at it and say, okay, from an individual standpoint, when you have individuals that are very capable with technology, right, how do you help challenge their ability to problem solve? How do you help them avoid the risks associated with multitasking versus task switching, right? And the aspect of it, because the executive function of the brain, it can only do one thing at a time well. But the idea of actually getting so focused and so interested that you're looking for solutions in your problem solving, universally, I continue to see that as something that's a significant challenge to us. Helping one build their acumen and understanding in today's environment, what does it mean? Whether it's your social acumen or your business acumen or your global acumen, however you want to look at the definition of that. The complexity of engagement today is increasing, so I see that as another area which will continue to evolve. The technical areas are always there, and you're always going to be, basically fixing when you need to fix. But these broader areas, to me, are the most interesting, and I think the ones that I see us facing in the future.
So you've been at PricewaterhouseCoopers for 38 years now, and you started out as an accountant.
Yes.
Tell us about your journey and how you became Chief Learning Officer.
It's fascinating. I am a CPA by background. My ability to do what I do is basically on the job, development and learning, which is probably why I'm more passionate about that, because of my own personal experience. But once I joined the firm, I started in our assurance practice. And then at basically the late 80s, early 90s, the profession itself started to get more interested in understanding how you can develop more greater industry expertise, because it was becoming more important to understand that context for the work that we were doing. So I was asked to just rotate into a national role to figure this out, given my background, which is in banking, telecommunications, manufacturing, and things like that. So I had a broad background, so it was a good opportunity to go there. I found that I enjoyed it, right? But what I felt when I was there, I always felt, and I've always felt, that there is nobility in being of service to others. So professional service, the nobility of doing that. I found myself saying that I can actually contribute to that by helping others be more capable, being able to serve better. So I found an interest in doing that. And then I started to just engage more, started to do my self-development and what I needed to do. And then from there, was there for a while, then I rotated back to the practice to be the Chief Operating Officer of our middle market sector, became a partner, and rolled into a global role for financial advisory services as the global learning officer for that, partner and learning officer for that. Moved on to partner in leadership development to explore that and get better grounded in the background of that, and then in 2004 became the CLO.
What would you say has made you successful?
And it's funny, it's probably not appreciating how much I didn't know, right? So I didn't know what I didn't know, so I was going forward and being curious about those things and being willing to experiment. I'm fortunate within the environment that I'm in, the standards that we employ, the expectations associated with it actually drive you to engage, to think more deeply and to explore. So what I think I was able to do is a couple things. One is recognize that my background as a CPA, recognize that I have this business and financial background, have this very deep focus and interest in how you then develop individuals around you and make them more successful. So I think probably at the heart of my success was always being curious and being fascinated by the nuance of behavior, and that wonderful point in time when you see the light bulb go on and you'd see that register on someone's face has always kept me fascinated. And so as a result, I've always been curious to explore how you can make that better and what are the things that are out there. So it's been fun to look at technology, even when it didn't seem to make sense, but look at the technology, look at the workplace environment and observe it. Even things that are outside of it. I actually found myself watching silent movies because there was more interaction, there was more emotion, and there was understanding the influence, the way you can communicate, how you would facilitate. And so also looking for things that gave me a better sense, not just how you communicate by your physical actions, but how do you communicate because of the verbal expressions that you use, the words you choose. Do they have meaning? Are they coded? So even in that, I found myself being fascinated by how you can advance one's ability to be effective if you can influence their understanding about the way they communicate. So just this natural, I think, fascination and curiosity that just stays there. It's even there now. Sometimes I feel as though I'm a kid in a candy store and I have the energy of a 3-year-old to keep going after it, to find that destination. It's out there, and I'll find it.
What advice would you give to someone who's just starting out in the industry, someone who's looking to become a learning leader?
I think recognize that if you've been trained that you have a natural foundation. Move beyond it. Understand the environment that you're in. Understand the broader influences that are going on in society around you, right? To be more impactful on how you think about not just the program, but the solution that you want to create, the outcome, right? Understand more about what's on the mind of the business leader, what's happening within the industry and the forces that influence that industry. Be curious about how generations are evolving, how technology is evolving, and keep shaping your point of view. So the simplest sense is do your preparation and research, right? Come to a point of view on it and be able to present that point of view in a way that people understand. And I think being patient about how you develop that will go a long way in advancing a career.
Can you talk about some of your proudest moments on the job?
I think we have a behavioral experience where we build bicycles. And when we broke 10,000 bicycles, knowing that they were going to children that needed them, senior citizens that needed to get more exercise in the process, and knowing that it was very connected to the firm's purpose, right, and being engaged with society and helping that. Passing milestone thresholds like that one, I always found very, very satisfying. Discover program that we were talking about earlier, because it was highly behavioral and personal. When I can design something that I can do at scale, but as an outcome has a very personal, individualized outcome for everyone, right? I get excited about those. In 38 years, I've lived with the firm quite a bit. It's been part of my family. So getting married, the birth of my children, their graduations from college, their weddings, it's all been part of those milestones.
What qualities do you look for when you're hiring for the organization?
Obviously, technical is there. It's a baseline. If you don't have it, you don't even get the opportunity. So we have a very high standard. The things that are really important for me is understanding what your level of passion is. What have you thought about? What excites you, right? Will you bring that excitement, that passion, and that curiosity to my organization? Because we're significantly focused in on the importance of relationships and connected to the business. So people who have that ability to engage usually rank higher on my list.
What role did mentors have in shaping your life and some of the decisions that you've made?
There's been several. It's interesting because sometimes a mentor surfaces in a place you didn't expect, right? So I don't think you can be prescriptive about it. And sometimes it was advice that I received at a time I didn't understand it. But it's always been driven by certain of the basic elements of that, which is setting expectations that I were always higher than what I thought was achievable. But I achieved them, right? Because they saw something in me, the potential in me, that pushed me farther. So there's been a range of those. There's been mentors who have helped me at times of crisis, that have helped me understand what the right choices are and made sure that I wasn't alone as I was going through those. So I've had a range of them, and they span my career. So even today, after 38 years and what I've accomplished, I have mentors that still take me to school. So I appreciate being around them.